Namaste, good evening. Welcome back to another online session of Super 30. दोस्तों ये चौथा एपिसोड है हमारा एपिसोड नंबर 4 एंड प्राइमरीली फोकस्ड ऑन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग प्रोडक्टिविटी लिंक्ड इंसेंटिव्स फॉर द HVAC&R इंडस्ट्री जो भारत सरकार ने इंट्रोड्यूस किया था इसका डिटेलिंग आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे अगले 30 मिनट में वी विल टॉक अबाउट प्रोडक्टिविटी लिंक्ड इंसेंटिव्स फॉर द HVAC मैन्युफैक्चरिंग. So today we have our colleagues from CEEW and I would like to welcome Himanshu and Shika. Hi Himanshu, hi Shika.
Hi Ajit.
Hi. Thank you very much for coming back. This is the episode 4. So the last 3 episodes have got great reviews. It's been a lot of knowledge session to all our viewers. If you have missed any of those, you can get to the RATA website. Under the event section, you will find all the earlier episodes. So over to you, Himanshu, to get started on tell us about CEEW and also what these productivity linked incentives are and how can MSMEs in the field of air conditioning and refrigeration take benefit out of it. And is it really for the MSMEs? And if not, then what is there for the MSMEs? Over to you, Himanshu and Shika.
Thanks, Ajit. I can't seem to see my slides actually.
Okay, I got this on. So let me play it for you. Go ahead.
All right. So thanks, Ajit. Today we are going to talk about production linked incentive scheme for AC component manufacturing, which is quite timely because the budget is going to be announced in another week. So let's get started. Can you please go to the next slide? So CEEW is among Asia's leading policy research institutions. We use data, integrated analysis, and strategic outreach to explain and change the use, reuse, and misuse of resources. And as you can see on your screen, we work across 7 focus areas, and we also have a dedicated Center for Energy Finance. Next slide, please. So, PLI scheme has been announced not just in the air conditioning sector, but across a range of sectors. If you have been following the news, they have announced a big incentive scheme for the semiconductor industry, which is worth $10 billion. And a similar scheme has been announced for the telecom sector as well. So this is actually aligned with the Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat goals. And under the PLI schemes, we basically want to decrease our dependence on imports. As you know, we depend on countries like China and Thailand for a lot of components. We basically have become an assembling economy. So in this particular schemes, the target segments are specific white goods, which are AC components and LED lights. And what's interesting in this scheme is that mere assembly of finished goods is not going to be incentivized. You're going to get the benefits of the scheme only if you go deep into the value chain, only if you manufacture components and then assemble them. So manufacturing is the key word here, and the bottom line is that through this scheme we want to capture as much value as possible domestically. Next slide, please. So you might ask why you need a PLI scheme for AC components in the first place. So if you look at this graphic, which we have reproduced from the India Cooling Action Plan, by 2037, which is about 16 years from now, the cooling demand is going to explode in India, right? It's going to increase by a whopping 8 times relative to the baseline of 2017-18. But what is interesting is that in this massive increase, the space cooling in buildings is the component which is going to see maximum growth, which is 11 times the baseline. Not to say that the other segments will not see this kind of growth, but the most appreciable growth will be seen in space cooling, right, which consists of air conditioners, larger air conditioning systems like chillers, VRF systems, etc. So to actually meet this demand, to actually capture this manufacturing opportunity, this PLI scheme is really timely, so as to bring as many players to set up facilities, manufacturing facilities in India. Next slide, please. So, AC component manufacturing, needless to say, needs a shot in the arm. And this graphic, these data points actually make it very clear. So if you see, if you take, for example, compressors, we depend heavily on uh, China and Thailand, right? Especially when it comes to energy efficient compressors, like which operate on inverter technology. 100% of those compressors are imported from China, right? As you can see, more than 85% of them are imported. The printed circuit boards, the graphic shows that we make almost 90% of them here, but the fact of the matter is that we only assemble them here. The supply chains do not exist in India, right? We need a lot of semiconductor components, and as you know, most of them are made in Taiwan and China. We do not have a semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem here. So uh, for that also we depend a lot on imports. And same goes for other components. You take heat exchangers, more than 60% are imported. You take copper tubes or copper walls, both inner groove tubes as well as plain copper tubes. We depend uh, squarely on imports, right? Uh, and according to some estimates, the value addition in air conditioning sector, including assembly and manufacturing of different AC components in India, is about 50% of total value, which is quite less, because uh, we can actually increase it with, given the kind of given the kind of technology that is required, given the kind of money that is required. You can increase it to at least 80 to 85%. Next slide, please. Right. So let's delve into the scheme a little deeper. So PLI scheme has created target segments based on the value add that different components, uh, you know, ha- give, to the sector. So you have AC components with high value intermediaries, low value intermediaries, and a combination of them. And they consist of compressors, because as you know, compressors require a lot of investment. They are also technology intensive. You need a lot of patented knowledge, a lot of investment through JVs needs to come in to get into this. So it's a high value intermediary. In the low value intermediaries, we target components like motors, cross flow fans, heat exchangers, sheet metal components, etc. Components that we already manufacture uh, uh, to some degree in India, but still depend on import. So there is an opportunity to increase the capacity, manufacturing capacity in India. Next slide, please. Right. So one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that only eligible companies will be able to apply for incentives under the PLI scheme. Uh, and firstly, one entity will be able to apply for one target segment only. But if you have a subsidiary, then through that subsidiary you can apply for other target segments as well. Uh, and what is this eligibility? Now, eligibility is defined as per the investment that you can put on the table, right? So gross block refers to the investment done in plant and machinery. So, as you can see, for high value intermediaries, the eligibility criteria is actually higher. You need to invest at least 200 crores uh, in plant and machinery to be able to uh, become eligible for the scheme. Uh, and at the same time, you have to show a certain amount of revenue as well. So With plant and machinery, you need to achieve a certain revenue. Only then you will be able to uh, get the benefits under the scheme. But the good thing is that this incentives are provided to companies of all shades, companies making both brownfield and greenfield investments. Uh, if they declare their plan for domestic value addition, how much employment they think they can generate through these investments, and what will be the share of exports they think they can tap into during the tenure of the scheme. Next slide, please. Right. So coming to the quantum of incentives, uh, I forgot to mention before, the PLI scheme is around, you know, is going to disperse incentives of around 6,200 crores. That includes both AC components as well as LED components. So the share of AC components is of course higher, about 5,000, nearly 5,000 crores are have been cornered by AC component manufacturers, large companies. In terms of incentives, the PLI scheme will give about 4 to 6% on incremental sales over the base year, which is 2019-20. So it means that if you apply for the scheme, how much more sales did you achieve over that baseline? You will get 4 to 6% of that total sales. That will be your incentive. That is what you will get from the government of India. But as I mentioned before, the applicants will have to fulfill the dual criteria, right? So you will have to, invest in plant and machinery, a minimum amount, and you will have to achieve incremental sales over the base year, right? Uh, what I referred to in the previous slide as revenue. Another point to make here is that the scheme is fund limited, which means that the total payout of incentives, which is 6,200 crores, are capped at are capped, so it can't go above that amount. Apart from that, there are some other conditions to be met. You'll have to pay an application fee. You'll also have to give a bank guarantee to the government of India. You'll also have to share the entire manufacturing process uh, that you're going to adopt, uh, including what segment you are targeting very clearly. All these details will have to be submitted to the government of India. Government of India has actually built an online platform for submission of all these details on their website, and it'll take a lot of time to go through all the details, so they are not here. But you know you can go to the website, you can go online and look those up. Next slide, please. So now we come to the slightly more analytical part, and I might add even speculative part, because we are yet to see how PLI scheme will pan out, right? So one thing is very clear from the eligibility criteria, that um, only big players will be able to apply for this scheme. This is a scheme for big players. So small players are excluded by design, right? So SMEs will not be able to apply for it unless they have, you know, plans for huge expansion, right? And they won't remain SMEs if that is the case. The second point, which is possible here, is loss of business, right? This is a scenario because these OEMs that have applied for this scheme, till now, they have actually depended on SMEs for certain components, right? But if they are manufacturing these components themselves for captive use, then they will not need their supply chain vendors anymore, right? And this includes both domestic and international vendors. So there is a possibility of losing some business, right? Apart from that, there will be increased competition in the domestic market. You will have these big players manufacturing these components at scale. So, that will increase the competition. And lastly, the incentives, and this might pan out in the long term, medium to long term, that these incentives will actually provide some kind of cost advantage to these companies uh, that have been selected for these incentives, right? So over the long term, they will be able to price their products lower than the other uh, players in the market, and the eventual result, and this is open to discussion, the eventual result might be that they uh, they'll get priced out, right? So these are some of the effects of this scheme on MSMEs. There's one more slide actually, but
Yeah, so I just want to just put actually those questions to you, which is coming up out
right.
here. You're pretty much saying that the PLI scheme is anti-MSME. Is that what it is? At least the way it looks like right now.
It actually is. One of the purported objectives of the PLI scheme is that it will give boost to the manufacturing ecosystem in India. Now, the ecosystem consists of all kinds of players, large and small, medium-sized players. But the way the scheme is designed, the way it is structured, uh, you know, it benefits only a few companies. So just to share this data point with you, about 26 companies have been shortlisted under the scheme. So in a country like India, 6,000 crores of incentives will be handed to just 26 companies, and all of these are large players. All of these, the Daikins of the world, the Hitachis, the Godrej, Voltas, etc. So it looks like this scheme doesn't do anything for MSMEs. They are
What you're
left out
saying
in
is
the
the
cold.
large, yeah. So the what you're saying is the large organizations have been incentivized to do backward integration. Correct? That's what
Yes,
it is. Now,
yes,
when that happens, people, small companies which are already into component, as you rightly said, will face severe competition, because their buyer themselves is now getting into their business, right? So, what should be the strategy for these
absolutely.
companies who are already in this business, and how should they face this market challenge?
Well, now this is actually a question that I should ask you, because you are in the business of manufacturing. But one thing that I can think of is that I think the SMEs will now have to go even deeper into the value chain. So they'll probably have to get into subcomponents business, to get into even smaller, uh, you know in the business of even smaller components, right? So for example, if SMEs have been manufacturing heat exchangers till now, right, and they had orders of 50,000, 80,000 from some OEM, then that order is no longer going to be there, right? So what do? So you try to restructure your business, because you cannot compete there, or uh, you find a way to uh, kind of come down the value chain. So if you are supplying to a tier 1 OEM, you might look to supply to a tier 2 OEM, you know who has not applied for this scheme, who is not getting the benefits. So I think uh, this is something that is still to pan out, and we'll have to see how SMEs find a way out of this. Just it's an existential sort of crisis for them, I think.
So, what do you think? This is like the first step for the large organizations. Do you see that another PLI scheme being declared for the MSMEs in this industry?
Well, we have been talking to quite a few people, and they all said that it's that the PLI scheme is not for them. All of these are you know uh, SME. Uh, all of these are small and medium enterprises. Uh, so they have shown some interest, in having such a scheme for SMEs. But the point is that SMEs already have so many issues to deal with, right? They have a huge payments problem. SMEs do not get paid on time, which affects quite adversely their operations. They do not have the required cash flow to run their operations. So, that is one big problem, one big piece of the problem. The second is the access to cheap credit. So, although Government of India, in principle, has rolled out schemes for the SME sector, the fact is that due to certain structural issues, due to lack of alignment between different institutions and the goals they pursue, uh, this credit is not accessed by the SMEs, right? We know this. We have discussed. Uh, I think the audience of this webinar are aware of these problems. So the first thing to do is to solve for these two big problems: how to give cheap credit to SMEs, and how do we solve for their payments problem. Following that, we can think of a
Shika, I think we lost Himanshu as expected, so I guess you'll have to take it from there.
Yeah, sure. I'm not really sure where he was going with his second point, but if I got the drift of it, of course, the first is to look at the larger ecosystem, right? Which, as he said, I mean, I think in all of the interactions that we have now been having with the RATA membership, that point has been driven home, time and again, that it's not just about creating a policy where you're encouraging domestic production. You really need to look at the state of how that production is happening, right, in the larger ecosystem in which it's supposed to happen from the SME point of view, and that really does need to be relooked at. So if I sort of think about the PLI scheme, the way that it has been designed today, right, I see two big problems with it in its construction. One is it's not actually differentiating between brownfield and greenfield investments, right? It's not really looking at or paying any sort of a nod or an acknowledgement to the technology transitions that are going to be mandated in a few years' time. And companies are well aware of these transitions. However, the government, by point of view of this incentive, is not actually nudging industry to move towards greater efficiency, to move towards lower GWP refrigerants. It's kind of left it open, and it's okay to be technology agnostic, but it's not okay to encourage technologies that we know are environmentally harmful, and the industry is going to have to incur a cost transition away from them in a few years to come in any case. The second problem that we see is the fact that it is not really considering the impact that this will have on SMEs, right? And we do think that if there is scope for this policy to be relooked at, both of these would be the points, that it really must acknowledge in terms of if there is a lead firm that is going into this sort of large production setup, what is the impact on sheer numbers of beneficiaries, right, in terms of jobs? And can those jobs be counted also when they are happening in the SME sector, which kind of encourages the company themselves to want to create a domestic supply chain rather than compete with the existing suppliers today in India. So I think this could be one aspect that may be pushed forward, and it is our hope that we actually, let's see what the budget brings up this year, but really we can have concentrated conversations on this, right? That what would a revised PLI look like for the SME sector in AC manufacturing, or what could a PLI scheme dedicated to SMEs look like, in this subsector? I really think that we should be having that conversation, because clearly the government is thinking about this sector, right? I mean, there may be points that as a group we all find problematic, within those larger policy documents. But the fact of the matter is that there is a lot of government attention on this as a sector, and we should encourage that rather than find problems with it and sort of not engage with it.
That's right. But typically in an MSME segment, like how Himanshu was talking about it also earlier, I think the number one problem they have is getting paid on time.
Yeah.
I mean, there are
Yeah.
MSME schemes and everything, but we all know it's
Yeah.
just not effective. Everyone's found a
Yeah.
way around it, and the MSMEs are always pushed there. Don't you think that's a bigger problem to address to get the
Yeah.
MSMEs going?
And
Because
I absolutely do agree, and I also think that those problems have to get addressed by the uh, by who this PLI is actually being targeted at, right? So the
yeah,
government is incentivizing these larger companies, who are worth a certain amount of crores of turnover every year, both domestic and globally. And it is those companies that need to realign their repayment schedules for SMEs to be able to operate effectively enough, right? That's like
that's right.
half of that problem gets solved if the government is able to mandate some sort of repayment and implement that, right? It's not just about creating the mandate or creating the scheme, but really about implementing it so that it is to the benefit of the larger employment sector, which is the MSME sector in India.
So I just have one question. Everybody seems to have the intent to help the MSME. The government seems to have an intent. There is enough discussion happening around it. Everyone understands the pain point. But why is the execution so poor? Why? What is it that we can do? What is it that the government is not understanding, or how is it that we can, as an industry representation, explain to them that this is the pain point and this is how it needs to be fixed? Do you have any thoughts around that? Like, as an association, we could actually take it up, or probably you, as a think tank, can actually bring it to their notice.
I mean, I think the first point is to really be able to quantify what that means in terms of economic losses, right? Like how much of that so-called capital, right, is not accessible because of this repayment issue, right, or access to capital issue. I think a second point would be that if we could really rethink, right? I mean, we know that the space cooling sector, for example, is going to grow 11 times in the next
That's
couple of
right.
decades, right? So, what does that mean in terms of the economic or the market valuation of components, right? The government has put out high value component, low value component. What does that mean, to our GDP? And I think to be able to present trade-offs in that manner, right? Because we're a developing emerging economy. We have we have problems in every sector, and every industry and every segment of industry feels like there are things that need to be happening in a better manner or in a more streamlined manner. So I think if we can really make it about what the contribution of really the ease of doing business for this particular subsegment or this particular of industry could look like, I do think that that would be enough to at least get the conversation get started in a very serious manner.
Yeah, I guess that's the biggest. The industries come on focus at the government, but we still kind of feel that the priorities are not set right. And now you come up with a PLI scheme, and you made a big hue and cry about it, only to realize that this is going to be a bigger threat for the local component manufacturers, and probably those 26 companies are the biggest beneficiaries of the whole thing. I guess we have some tough times ahead, and hopefully we can make some representations. And at CEW, you have been working very closely with the government, so we hope that you can get that voice across to them. And this
Yeah,
needs to
no,
be
we,
fixed.
we we really look forward to sort of getting this kind of intelligence from the membership base of RATA, like to hear these sort of discerning points of views, and getting that data together to really be able to make a compelling case for rethinking some of these schemes, or at least some parts of these schemes.
Amazing. Great. We're down to our 30 minutes. So thank you very much for actually sharing your thoughts on this, because this is an area that was having a lot of confusion, because there was a lot of drum beating going on, saying that PLI schemes, and it was very important that
Sure,
we put it out there and we said that that no, there is a threat in that whole scheme. You've got to see it
sure.
in its totality, and there is a way to actually prepare for it. And let's keep our fingers crossed. I hope, since the intent is there would be a PLI scheme for smaller component manufacturers, and hopefully the credit and the capital requirement is also addressed. Thank you so much, Shika and Himanshu, for sharing this information. It's always a pleasure to have you guys, because it's a lot of knowledge that the industry gets hearing from you. Thank you so much, and
Thank you so
we'll
much
get
for
back.
having us.
My
And we're going to
pleasure.
get back to you. We are going to get back to you next month with another interesting topic, which will share information about what's happening in the industry and how you can prepare for it. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.